Hey guys, what's up? I love talking about my RPG collection and my favorite RPGs of all time as much as anybody else out there. But that is the point of this video. I am a collector and an RPG hardcore collector. I've been collecting RPGs for the past 10 years or perhaps even more. Which begs the question, do I own every single one of my top 10 favorite RPGs on every single console that I care about? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out today. So let's begin! Alright, we're gonna start with the PlayStation 1. This is my top 10 from left to right, Final Fantasy VII being my number 10, and Chrono Cross down there being my number 1. Now I've had this order for years actually, except number 10. Number 10 I usually can't make up my mind which is my favorite, which belongs to that actual spot. One day is Vanguard Bandits, which is extremely and stupidly expensive. The next day is Cardia. This is a game that I've never been able to find for a decent price. And the next day is Parasite Eve, which I do own as a matter of fact. But because Final Fantasy VII is the one that I've beaten the most times out of those other games, I guess it deserved to be in number 10. Long live the PlayStation. I love this console. Some of my all-time favorite RPGs are right here in this picture, and I'm so happy to own them all. So let's continue to the PlayStation 2. Now, with the PlayStation 2, I have the exact same problem with number 10. My number 10 right there, I put Radiata Stories, and my number 1 all the way down there in the corner, Valkyrie Profile 2. I've had this order for years, especially from number 5 to number 1. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are usually changing, especially 6 to 9, and my number 10 is usually something different. This time I decided to put Radiata Stories because that's the one that I've beaten the most out of the other candidates, which were Shadow Hearts 1 and 2 and Xenosaga 3. And even at some point it was Grow Lancer Generations. But I really thought about this and I think Radiata Stories is truly my number 10. And the rest, I don't think I'll ever change my mind, but who knows, right? In the meantime, this is my top 10, my favorite RPGs on the PlayStation 2, my favorite console of all time, you already know that. And you'll probably notice the .hack GU Volume 3 Redemption right there seems to be stacking up to something. That's because I actually consider the entire trilogy as one game simply cut into 3 volumes, which is why they're called Volume 1, 2, and 3. But yeah, this is my top 10, make no mistake, moving on to the PlayStation 3. So this is my PlayStation 3 top 10, I own them all. Now, there's a little bit of a controversy with the order. Sometimes I can't decide numbers 7 to 10. 10 being in this picture Atelier Shelley, and number 1 all the way down there, Nier. Now, Nier is my absolute favorite on the PlayStation 3, but sometimes the rest of the games could be in any order, to be honest, especially from number 5 to number 2. And I'm gonna have to admit right away that I own Lost Dimension on the PlayStation 3, but I actually beat the game on the PlayStation Vita. And there's one game missing from this picture, and that is Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2, well actually both of them. I don't own those games, but like Lost Dimension, I actually play them and beat them on the PlayStation Vita. Regardless, this is my PlayStation 3 top 10 as it stands right now, at least the ones that I actually own. Love the PlayStation 3, such an underrated console nowadays, and I'm so happy to own my top 10. So let's move on to the PlayStation 4. Now, I'll be completely honest with you all guys, I don't really have a top 10 yet on the PlayStation 4. Sure, I do have one for no ports and remix, that's a video that I already did, and I also have one for ports and remix. But if I had to combine them right now, right at this very moment, and make my ultimate top 10 favorite PS4 RPGs, I guess this will be it, and maybe, just maybe in this order. This isn't 100% accurate, but let's just say for now that Valkyria Chronicles 4 is my number 10, and all the way down there, Is 8 Lacrimosa of Dana will be my number 1. But honestly, I still haven't decided my right top 10, my perfect order, which is the reason why I haven't done yet an ultimate top 10 favorite RPGs on the PlayStation 4, combining ports, remakes, remasters, new releases, everything. And by the way, you also probably noticed that Trails of Cold Steel 4 is stacking up. That's because I also consider Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4 as one game cut into 2 parts, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, so far as of the making of this video, this is my top 10 PlayStation 4 RPGs. Now moving on to the PSP. The PSP is the most problematic console for me. I've never been able to decide a proper order. Yes, I have a couple of videos on the best JRPGs on the PSP, but make no mistake, I gotta confess this right now, I still have no idea about my order, about my favorites, which is my number 1, which is my number 2, 3. Damn man, I can't decide, so this picture is actually pretty much in random order, and I'm actually missing 3 games. You only seeing 7 games right here. That's right, I don't have my top 10 favorite RPGs on the PSP, sadly. The games that I'm missing are Trails in the Sky. There's 2 games on the PSP, but only the first one got a physical release. I'm also missing Hexis Force, and that game's been expensive for as long as I can remember. I've never been able to find a copy of the game for a decent price. And the last one I'm missing, it's also been expensive for a long time, and that is Is the Oath in Felghana. Damn that game. I actually own Is 6 on the PSP, and that's the last game I bought in Canada. But I actually prefer the PS2 version, so I'm not including this game here. But anyway, the PSP is a console where I don't own my 10 favorite RPGs. You could say that I own my top 5, but definitely not without Trails in the Sky, which is actually what I consider to be the best RPG on the PSP. Maybe not my favorite, but once again, I don't have a favorite yet. Anyway, let's move on to the PS Vita. Pathetically, I own like 10 games on the PS Vita. All the others are RPGs that are not in my top 10, or games that aren't even RPGs at all. These are the only 4 that are actually in my top 10. Yikes! But the truth of the matter is that some of my favorites on the PS Vita, I play them digitally, and I own them on other systems like Odin's Sphere, for example, Is 8 Lacrimosa of Dana, Persona 4, I actually own the PlayStation 2 version. Lost Dimension should be here, but like you saw before, I own it on the PlayStation 3. So because this is a video about owning the physical versions of my favorite RPGs on every system, yep, that means I don't have my favorite games on the Vita, my top 10, I don't have it, not even a top 5 as you can see right here. Yikes! Anyway, I need to work on that, but you know how the PS Vita collecting is. I'm pretty sure if you collect for this system, you already know it's very hard, and it's been very hard for many years to collect for this goddamn system. Anyway, that's it for PlayStation. Now we're gonna move on to Nintendo. Man, who am I kidding? I don't really collect RPGs for the Nintendo. I've never done that before, and I probably never will. I very much prefer their remakes or their ports, like the Dragon Quest IV game. I prefer it on the Nintendo DS. You get the idea. So this is the only RPG I have on the NES. And to be honest, I'm not really interested in collecting RPGs on this console. So let's move on to the Super Nintendo. Super Mario RPG is the only one out of my top 10 that I own on the Super Nintendo. 3 games that are actually in my top 5 are Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, and Breath of Fire. But as you can see, I own the PlayStation versions or the Game Boy Advance version, and I don't own one of my all-time favorite RPGs on the Super Nintendo, which is Lufia 2, another game that's been expensive since forever, since pretty much I started collecting. It was already a $50 to $60 game, just the cartridge. And yikes, nowadays it probably goes for 3 times more than that. So yeah, the Super Nintendo is yet another system where I don't even own my top 5 favorite RPGs, but at least I own some of them in other systems, which are actually the versions that I play them finished, by the way. Now moving on to the Gamecube, I'm skipping the Nintendo 64 because I just don't care about that system, so yeah, Gamecube. Sadly, I only own 3 of my 5 favorite RPGs. Which means not even top 10. The Gamecube is another system where I don't own all of my favorite RPGs on it. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance has been my favorite RPG on the Gamecube for a long time, so there it is. Baten Kaitos has been my number 2 for a long time, so there it is. I'm missing its prequel called Baten Kaitos Origins. I did own that game at one point, but I sold it out of necessity. And Lost Kingdoms will be probably my number 5 or 6. I don't know yet, I'm not entirely sure, but my number 4 would actually be Tales of Symphonia. However, I own Tales of Symphonia on the PlayStation 3, and I did own twice at some point the GameCube version, and I sold both versions like an idiot, but I don't really care because I'm happy with the PlayStation 3 version. That's just me though. Bottom line, I don't own all of my favorite RPGs on the GameCube. Anyway, moving on to the Nintendo Wii. Yet another system where I don't own my 10 favorite RPGs, but at least I own my 5. Yes, my number 1 will be Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, number 2 The Last Story, number 3 Sakura Wars, number 4 Arc Rise Fantasia, and actually number 5 is not Pandora's Tower. Number 5 will be for me maybe Xenoblade Chronicles or maybe Tales of Symphonia 2, but as you can see in this other picture, I own them on other systems. And I'm actually happy with those versions because the Wii versions of those two games aren't really that great in my opinion. Tales of Symphonia 2 plays great on the Wii, but I'd rather own the PlayStation 3 remaster, that's just my opinion. Another game that I'm missing is Muramasa, but I own it on the PlayStation Vita like you saw, and that's the version I played and finished, so I'm happy with that version. So the final game will be Pandora's Tower, right? At least I own it. But you know, I'm not cheating, I don't own my 10, not even my 5 favorite RPGs on the Wii. Such a shame, right? I don't really mind, I'm happy with these 5. So let's move on to the Nintendo Wii U. Not! Because I don't really care about that console either. So let's just continue with the Nintendo Switch. Now, the Switch is a damn mess. I definitely do not own my 10 favorite RPGs on the Switch because I just don't have a top 10 yet, that's right. Sure, like with the PlayStation 4, I did 2 videos, one on no ports and no remix, and another one with ports and remix. But I gotta say that a lot of RPGs released on the Switch, I actually played them on the PlayStation 4, like Ys 8 for example, Dragon Quest 11. The problem once again is that I played most Switch RPGs on the PlayStation 4. But at the same time, I don't really care because I don't have yet a top 10 decided. And when I do, I'll make sure to make a video about it. For now, let's move on to the portable systems of Nintendo. I'll be honest, I don't really care about collecting RPGs for the Game Boy. In fact, the Game Boy was part of my childhood, but I only had like 3 games, including Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle 2, that you can see right there. But I'm not really interested in collecting for the Game Boy, at least not at this moment, so the only 2 RPGs that I have right there are the Final Fantasy Legend 1 and 2. Legend 2 being actually the very first RPG I ever played in my life, so of course I had to have it. But yeah, who am I kidding? I don't really care about collecting for the Game Boy, at least not at this moment. So let's move on to the Game Boy Advance, because also I don't care about the Game Boy Color either, sadly. To be honest with you, I never really cared about the Game Boy Advance before, just like I never cared about the Game Boy or the Game Boy Color, collecting for those systems I mean. So all I cared about back then was owning the 2 Fire Emblem games, which are my number 1 and 2. And I was fortunate enough to find them complete in box, as you can see right there, for a very decent price. I don't remember paying more than $20 for each of them. So I started playing other RPGs on the Game Boy Advance and really getting into Game Boy Advance RPGs, but that was barely 3-4 years ago maybe. Yeah, so by the time I started really collecting and getting to collecting Game Boy Advance RPGs, my time was up. Most of the games that I wanted were crazy expensive, like Shining Force for example, Final Fantasy VI. Breath of Fire, I managed to grab a loose copy of it, as you can see right there, but I don't have the second one. And of course the Summon Night games and the Super Robot Tyson games. Yeah man, I'm far from owning my favorite RPGs on the Game Boy Advance. So let's just move on to the Nintendo DS. Well, I only have 6 out of the 10 favorite RPGs on this system. I've only done a video called No Ports and No Remakes, and I also did the top 50 recently, about a month ago. But a definitive top 10 on the Nintendo DS, I've never done it. So in the meantime, here are my 10 favorites. I'm missing 4 of them. I'm missing, first and foremost, Suikoden and Tear Christ. Damn. Of course, I'm missing Devil Survivor 2, but we'll get to that later because I own both of them on the 3DS. Also missing a very expensive game that's been expensive for a long time, Endless Frontier. That's right, super robotizing OG saga Endless Frontier. It's one of my personal favorites on the DS. I don't have it. And the last game could be pretty much anything. Maybe Sands of Destruction, I don't know. Maybe Sola to Robo, I don't know, but those 2 games are also kind of expensive, and when I started collecting for the DS, they were already expensive. But anyway, at least I own these 6 games, but that also means the Nintendo DS is yet another console where I don't own my top 10 favorite RPGs, not even my top 5, because pretty much I'm missing Devil Survivor 2 there, or maybe Suikoden and Tear Christ. Those are my top 5 favorite RPGs, alongside Radiant Historia, Devil Survivor 1, and Might and Magic Clash of Heroes. Anyway, let's move on to the 3DS. Miraculously, the 3DS is the only Nintendo system where I do own my 10 favorite RPGs, yeah! From left to right, number 10 being Fire Emblem Awakening and number 1 being the remake of Radiant Historia. And I was very lucky to find sealed copies of Radiant Historia and Shin Megami Tensei 4 Apocalypse. Of course, I bought them when they were dirt cheap, when they were like 20 bucks. Nowadays are like $200, maybe, I don't know. But anyway, I'm so happy to say and to see that I do have my 10 favorite RPGs on the 3DS. But a little embarrassed to say it's the only Nintendo console where I own my top 10. Anyway, now let's move on to Microsoft. I only care about one console, and that is the Xbox 360. And it's another console where I do own my top 10, yeah! I had to cheat and include Star Ocean and Eternal Sonata, the PS3 versions. And those are 2 games that are actually in my top 5, as you can see. So yeah, the 360 is another console where I don't own my top 10 favorite RPGs, not even top 5. But at least I own 2 of my top 5 on other systems, the PlayStation 3, and those are my preferred versions actually. Nothing wrong with the 360 versions of these 2 games, great games too, playable, perfectly playable and enjoyable on the 360. But I do prefer these PlayStation 3 releases. And also you're seeing a PlayStation 2 game over there, that's Phantasy Star Universe, Ambition of the Illuminus, that's the second game in the Universe saga. The physical version was released only on the PlayStation 2, but you can find the digital version of this game on the 360. Just a small trivia. Now, I own nothing on the TurboGrafx. That's a console I started caring for last year actually, and most of the games that I want are crazy expensive, and the other company is Sega. My god, I never really cared about anything from Sega years ago when I started collecting. Some time ago I got this game, which is actually my favorite Sega Genesis RPG of all time, thankfully. But that's about it. This is the only Sega game I own in my collection. The reason why is because I started caring and playing Sega games and Sega RPGs about 3 to 5 years ago, as a matter of fact, and well, that's exactly when prices for most Sega systems started to go up. I got into collecting for Sega consoles very, very late. Now, before you click away, let me remind you one more time that my books are available on Amazon.com. Links in the description below. These are very horror-like psychological horror stories, so perfect reads for this Halloween month. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!